Win a free car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. You have a chance of winning a luxurious royal ride, Ford Ranger. Draw a date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Lewis Appliances, Corner Trafford Road and Edward Street. Caribbean Jewelers, Trinity Mall. Mandarin Mini Mart St. Anne's. A. Moses and Sons, 181 Trafford Road. Quaysay Supermarket, Calcutta Road number 2. Strive Restaurant and Bar, Mukarapa Road. New Car and Auto Shop, West Mall. First Priority Music, Gulf City Mall. SNSR Food Center, Princesstown. Quaysay Best Price, St. Mary's Junction. Romaines Hardware, Maribel. Cascade Mini Mart. Kelly Supermarket, Digger Mountain Main Road. The Unit Trust Agency in West Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College Christmas free car raffle.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
WESN.
Well, things are escalating, not necessarily quickly, but they're escalating. As we're in, I guess this is day 139, give or take a few days of this entire Southern Caribbean stress test. I guess you could say it's a stress test. It's to see how much stress it's going to take before we crack. Now, once again, an unprecedented situation. Interesting, limited escalation, as much as some people might think. What do you mean limited? Well, if they started an invasion right away, we're still technically steps before that. I don't know necessarily how many steps. I don't know why they're stringing it out so long. And perhaps it all comes back down to the thought that the Americans want some sort of justification. So they are provoking Venezuela to do something stupid, and maybe then they'll go in. Or they don't necessarily actually want to go in, but they are provoking Venezuela to try to get a certain response by which they could then do counteractions, specific counteractions. I really don't know. I'm all just speculating here because on some level, not only is this situation unprecedented for the region, but there's certain aspects of the situation which is unprecedented globally. First of all, utilizing anti-terrorism laws to go after drug cartels, not necessarily for the sake of arrest. You've arrested terrorists, not necessarily trying to arrest these drug smugglers to try and build a case, get evidence, etc., etc. Although I guess in part, perhaps they think they don't need any further indulgence. It's unprecedented in the sense of when they confiscated the sanctioned oil tanker. It's not like we see that very often. And now that they've blockaded Venezuela for sanctioned oil tankers, that's what the blockade apparently is. Because unsanctioned vessels, that is to say legal vessels, continued on their journeys, no muss, no fuss. The report is that they were escorted by the Venezuelan Navy, which that would be very interesting if they call America's bluff with regards to escorting an unsanctioned oil tanker, because I'm not entirely sure if they have the capacity to properly defend it without causing an international incident, which could then kickstart this whole thing. So I don't know who's playing the game of chicken if we come to that point. I just fear that somebody's going to miscalculate, whether it's Venezuela or the US, and then things kind of maybe go too far. You might think, oh, they've gone too far already. Yes, but they can go further still, and it's not something, regardless of how much faith you have, it's still not something that I think one should hope for. This is weird because the flip side of that is every time I want to advocate or state the position of no regime change, I feel as though you're basically kind of telling people of Venezuela, hey, we don't really care about you. I mean, that's why it's very telling when the Prime Minister says the government of TNT stands with the people of Venezuela, not with the government of Venezuela. So now there's a blockade. Because the thing is, I wonder if these precedents might be applied elsewhere. I won't doubt that they may have already been, maybe just not to the scale, to the scope. But one of the things that I want to tell people is this isn't just Trump. This is something that U.S. Southern Command, the American military, and other politicians have been kind of talking about for years. They've been looking at transnational crime in the region as a security threat, the military arm, even during Biden's time. It's just that it's one of those things where the question is, has it passed the threshold? To what extent does the intelligence link transnational crime to the Maduro regime? That's something that they haven't told us. That's not something that I'm willing to just assume to be fine, go right ahead, and I'm not going to have any more questions. No, I'm going to have more questions. Of course, these days having questions somewhat seems like a risky proposition if you ever want to go to the States again. Now, alongside all of this, there was a new visa ban. And there's a long document from the White House. I'm not entirely sure if it's a brand new document or updated document, but it does include, this is a document that does include Dominica and Antigua and Barbuda. Now, we have a report that says that, you know, the leaders of both countries think that the restriction stems from an error and miscommunication. And I'm not necessarily sure why they think for whatever reason, the U.S. thinks that they have citizenship by investment. I'll be honest, it's a CBI program, citizenship by investment. The whole concept of it, I do find I'm uneasy with it, to be honest. But hey, apparently the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, is saying that the logic by which you're looking at our citizenship by investment, not including a residency program, that's what was highlighted in the statement. Antigua and Barbuda has historically had a CBI without residency. Same thing for Dominica. Prime Minister Brown is saying, no, that's not the case. He said that they've worked with U.S. government departments to strengthen safeguards and the programs, but I think this is one of those things where either the higher-ups, they don't view it the way that Prime Minister Brown views it, or maybe they just don't care. They don't want any loopholes whatsoever. One of the issues I have, and I spoke about it yesterday with regards to our government, and you see it in other aspects of policy around the world, is at some point, If you allow people to push agendas, political ideology too far, because it sounds right, and what's the harm, and what's the worst that could happen? The problem is when you push things too far to the extreme, you do get negative consequences. And usually, it's overcompensated for on the backswing by whoever comes afterwards with the mandate to fix it. And make no mistake, on some level, Trump has somewhat of a mandate by at least half the country to fix illegal immigration. The problem is, a lot of people might think it's too heavy-handed. But there doesn't seem to be that much pushback with regards to that. Why? Because at the end of the day, people who pushed normalizing illegal immigration pushed too many citizens too far. And now we get what we get. Imagine if that happened here. Imagine if basically immigration said, we don't care about Venezuelans being here. How would we think? I mean, if it's one or two, then it doesn't mean anything, right? A couple of illegal immigrants isn't really going to cause us any harm. The problem is once you publicly declare yourself open for business, open for any and everybody to come unfettered with no restrictions or controls, that will exponentially just increase the amount of people that will opt into that situation, and then you have multiple negative consequences with regards to creating a situation that you are not actively trying to manage and do not necessarily have the things in place in order to compensate for. So perhaps Antigua and Barbuda and Dominica is basically, I wouldn't necessarily say scapegoat, but it's just one of those things where unless they want to change those policies, it might not matter what they do. Now, the question is, how much further are things like this going to go? To what extent is it politics, or to what extent is it just a brutal application of policy / ideology? Brutal in the sense of, look, we're not here to give people a chance, to give you time. It is what it is, and we'll respond as we see fit. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You can do what you want to do, but we're going to do what we want to do. And perhaps that is going to be the politics of the world more and more as time goes on post-COVID. Because at the end of the day, you may not realize it or not, but America is not the only country doing things like that. There are other countries in Europe, there are other countries around the world. China and Russia basically do that. We just don't necessarily hear all the criticisms about it. But yeah, now there's a blockade. Prime Minister is basically saying, we're not a part of that. We're not involved in the blockade. The quote is, TNT is about TNT first. Our partnership with the US is about TNT safety and security here. Those are issues for the Trump administration and for the US. TNT is not part of that blockade. We're about TNT. I guess this is basically not answering the obvious question of, but do you support it? Do you agree with it? Although, this is the thing that people need to understand, our agreement or assent does not matter. It was probably not sought out, and it will have little sway on the actions of the American military. But I guess it's just a question that the people want to hear, because they want to hear our leaders' mindset. They want to hear our leader's opinion. They want to hear our leader, to some extent, with regards to the thoughts of the nation and how we perceive this situation. They want to hear our leader lead us. It is against sanctioned oil tankers. On some level, I would not care if the Prime Minister said, as an ongoing effort to curb illegal activity in the region, including the illegal transportation of oil via unsanctioned vessels, or not unsanctioned, sorry, via sanctioned vessels or illegal vessels. I welcome the attempt of the American Navy, because we should remember not too long ago we had an oil spill because of such illegal activity. An oil spill whom the perpetrator of we have been unable to track down, and thus we could only seek international aid from agencies, not from the actual responsible party, to get financial compensation. And the rest of the bill that the aid doesn't cover, we have to foot ourselves. And that did take a little bit of a chunk out of the budget that year. Apparently, America is looking to increase the size of the U.S. Naval Armada. That's something to look out for, because, again, on some level, what they had was overkill to go after drug boats. But with regards to being able to surveil the entire Southern Caribbean, maybe that was somewhat the number of assets you needed, just, you know, to keep an eye on every corner. This is, remember, they were doing this before they put the radar in Tobago. More ships, though, now we've reached the point where you are definitely not going after pirogues. And I guess this is one of those things where I wish they would just say what they want or what they intend to do, and not go through this song and dance of, well, we're curtailing illegal activity, but we're doing so with what is the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. I don't know, when you say it like that, because that's a quote from the President Trump, kind of makes me wonder, is that really necessary to go after pirogues? In fact, the situation in the American Congress is, well, it's progressing in the sense that votes, resolutions attempting to debate the issue and force the issue in Congress, they have more or less not been passed. They haven't reached President Trump's desk. And one Republican has even gone to the point of saying, well, you know what, if I'm not necessarily, I don't have a problem if the goal is regime change. Of course, the question is, it's the anti-terrorism laws, so right now it's a situation that apparently the president has a certain amount of discretion for, and maybe lawmakers who disagree in America, who disagree with the president's actions, maybe they should be looking at, we should change some of these laws back, right? But an invasion, a regime change situation, that might still require Congress. But he might have it, he might have the support already anyway. That's the signals that we're getting. Which is ironic, because I'm not entirely sure if it was laws crafted during the Bush administration or laws crafted during the Obama administration that he's kind of taken advantage of. At this point, it doesn't really matter to me. War. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's going to be quite the war that people think it is, given the fact that the military here is probably even worse equipped and maintained and trained than the Iraqi army, and that didn't really go so well with regards to the war fighting portion. The regime change, however, there's a lot of variables to that. I need to see more to see how that's going to unfold before I'm going to start to stress about things that I don't know. I'm not going to do that. Meanwhile, while the Prime Minister is basically trying to not say certain things or get caught saying certain things, I'm not entirely sure why she could be so gung-ho about certain things and then very careful about others. Former Prime Minister Dr. Rowley, he is disappointed in the whole situation with regards to allowing the Americans to use our airports. Now, on some level, I mean, he's saying the move is an attempt to make the country a vassal state. Now you're going too far. Now you're just throwing out hyperbole and rhetoric out there that is meaningless to me. And then, you know, there's all the rhetoric of I'm disappointed, I've lived in this country since 1962, I was always tremendously proud, and I'm still proud of Trinidad and Tobago. Are you proud of the fact that guns and drugs are coming into the country unabated? Are you proud about that? Or the fact that a cross-section of our national security apparatus is so lazy or callous or corrupt that they're just allowing this stuff to happen, allowing the contraband to come here? About the fact that the prison seemingly is not necessarily under the control of the prison service, but is more under the control by the prisoners. I mean, a lot of this stuff happened under your watch too, so it's not like we could just say it's only the UNC where these things happen. Let's put it this way. If we got our ability to get certain visas to travel tomorrow, will people change their minds about our Prime Minister having such strong, friendly intentions towards America? I don't know if the Prime Minister said no, if we would have gotten reprisals. You gotta understand, regardless of whether we think it's right or not, ethical or not, another country could do what they want to do. America does, half the time doesn't threaten people with what they'll do to you. They're just threatening you with, well, we'll just cut you off from us. Good luck with that. And most people don't like that, which kind of makes it hilarious when everyone is always quick to condemn America while still wanting to use America. It's something that I bring up all the time, but I didn't bring it up quite like that before. But he did make one point. I think I'm trying to find what the point he made, because I think I lost it here. He did make one point that I couldn't completely disagree with. I do disagree completely with calling us this situation, turning us into a vassal state. Right. Dr. Rowley accused the UNC-led administration of quietly shifting away from the posture that he had, being independent, being more neutral, suggesting the decision was taken away without sufficient transparency or public engagement. That last part there, I can't fully disagree with that. Now, public engagement, you don't make these kind of decisions with public engagement. No offense. You more or less never really used public engagement when you were making foreign affairs decisions. When you had to close the borders for COVID and keep our people out, did you utilize public engagement? When it's to determine what nation's investment plan you're going to go with, who you're going to take the loans from, what vaccines you're going to buy. You know, whose foreign policy agenda are you going to align our foreign policy agenda with? We don't really hear much about public engagement on those issues. But sufficient transparency, because it comes back to what I keep saying, people want to be led. They don't necessarily want a dictator. They don't want a king. More on that later on in the show. But people in the democratic process choose a leader. The thought for most people is, I have my life and the worries of my life. I would prefer not to have to worry about all these other things. We have a government whose job it is technically to worry about all these other things. Government, you do that. I just need to know that things are going okay. You just need to tell me enough to show me that things are going to be okay. Now the question is that being done sufficiently? And how egregious is the fault of a lack of transparency? Because with security issues, transparency is always going to be never unlimited. It's just now the question is how limited? To what degree is it going to be limited? Meanwhile, the Chief Secretary, well, yesterday, Chief Secretary is still unaware about certain things with regards to the radar situation. And Augustine declared he's not seeing Tobago as a target, despite the development. Apparently 2 military jets landed in Crown Point that day. Cool. I mean, part of it is we do have to question what sort of weaponry do the Venezuelans have? Not historically, not stuff we know that they bought 30 years ago. What do they have that's operational? And to be honest, think about it. It's not like when there's a shootout in East Port of Spain that people in Woodbrook get hit with bullets. That's kind of not how it works. If there's an American destroyer parked up in our port right now and they took shots at that, yeah, then something might hit us. Now the question is, will they want to badmind the situation and just attack us for that? To spite us, not for any discernible military objective, because at the end of the day, we're not actually fighting them. If they want to fight that fight, they actually need to go after military targets, not us. And I'm of two minds of that badman scenario. And just to switch gears a little bit, I want to, as I was speaking about the Chief Secretary, of course the THA elections are coming up. One of the things that he brought up was an island-wide CCTV system. Now, I think obviously you would say smaller island, so compared to Trinidad, an island-wide system is a lot easier in Tobago than Trinidad. There's two things, however, that we need to ask. One, exactly what kind of system is going to be implemented and how will it deal with potential sea blast corrosion on the cameras, what kind of cameras it will be, etc., right? That might not be that important as opposed to the next part with regards to what kind of budget the system are you hoping to have and how much coverage are you hoping to have. Because the obvious minimal CCTV system in Tobago that you could then use to deal with most of your issues is to put cameras on the major intersections and choke points, right? That way you could track from zone to zone where what car moves where. But to say that you want every inch of Tobago's roadways covered by CCTV cameras, that might be a little bit more difficult. Now, you could do something of a hybrid like that. There's certain stretches of the road going north, whether on the north coast or the east coast, southeast coast, where it's not like there's some parallel road they could turn off onto, right? So again, if you just get the intersections, you could track people from intersection to intersection. But of course, they still have gaps. Budget any day is the issue. Hopefully they don't do a CCTV footage system on the cheap. But yeah, I guess that's where we reach. Even while crime is down, the Prime Minister is saying crime, look at how great things are going with everything else going down. Crime is down murders are down by a significant percentage. I'm not entirely sure how much I think that will hold, but drugs are being confiscated. They got some illegal alcohol, which that's an interesting sign. That was confiscated, I believe, yesterday, worth somewhere around 5 million or so. Maybe the crime waves that we have in the last few years, maybe it is over. Look at that. Maybe we solved it with a couple state emergencies and America bombing the hell out of drug boats. I don't know. I don't know if it's gonna hold. See, this is where now you have to ask yourself, what is the priority? Because people, it's easy to say, I don't want the Americans to do what they're doing. But also, we want foreign help to do with transnational crime. Those two things are not quite the same, because the sticking point will be the how. But really what it comes down to is, because a lot of people will think, well, you either choose option A or option B. No, you don't necessarily have to just outright choose one over the other. Rather, what is the priority? I think on some level, the ability to look at a situation and know what to prioritize is something that's lost on our decision making and leadership. And I fear that we are more diminished, we are less than, worse off than 40 years ago, when politicians actually had to make harder decisions than, say, now. Because it's not as though we've seen a whole set of projects, infrastructure investments, and the like. Yes, we had the highway expansion project by Shogunas. But when you look at Trinidad on certain basic levels, it looks the same as it did 20, 30 years ago. There might be more buildings in certain spots, but the infrastructure of it, how the workflow patterns, where a lot of the offices and the businesses are located, etc., the layout of the country and how we move around it all is more or less unchanged, or changed very little. Because what have we prioritized in the meantime? More on that in a bit. Let's take a break. This is Document on WESN, the Connect Cattle. Sean Michael Small. We'll be right back after this.
Win a pre-car raffle organized on behalf of Queen's Royal College. You have a chance of winning a luxurious royal ride, Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Lewis Appliances, corner Tragrid Road and Edward Street. Caribbean Jewelers, Trent City Mall. Mandarin Mini Mart St. Anne's. A. Moses and Sons, 181 Tragrid Road. Quaysay Supermarket, Calcutta Road number 2. Strive Restaurant and Bar, Mukarapa Road. New Car and Auto Shop, West Mall. First Priority Music, Gulf City Mall. SNSR Food Center, Princesstown. Quaysay Best Price, St. Mary's Junction. Romaines Hardware, Marabal. Cascade Mini Mart. Kelly Supermarket, Diggle Mountain Main Road. The Unit Trust Agency in West Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College Christmas 3-car raffle.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics. Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him! I know him!
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
All right, so we had a lot of economic talk yesterday. Now there's another story, and I can't remember, I believe it was yesterday where I brought up the story. Right, NGOs, they're looking at, unofficially, anecdotally, they call an increase in people asking for donations. Now, not necessarily without statistics for that, I believe. I don't think they gave numbers with regards to the situation. But now opposition leader Penelope Beckles is more or less saying the same thing. This is the quote: "Constituents and citizens from all corners of the island have reached out seeking assistance, many sharing painful stories of job losses in 2025 and the daily challenges in our face. Throughout the year, I distribute hampers, but during the Christmas season, I make a special effort." The requests have come in the thousands, not only from Arima, but also from neighboring constituencies. Now, it is the leader of the opposition. So technically, she has an incentive for anything that makes government look bad. So just kind of keep that back in mind, right? Have a little bit of a grain of salt, but let's just kind of see where this goes, assuming, that this is at least partially true, if not outright true. The requests have come in the thousands, not only from Arima, but also from neighboring constituencies like Moruga, Grandi, Tunapuna, Malabar, and surrounding areas. The scale of need this year has been unprecedented, and I believe this is partly due to my call to serve as the new leader of the opposition, which has brought increased visibility and expectations. I guess, yes, if some people feel as though the system has left them behind, who they're going to call? They're going to call on the other guy, and in this case, the other guy is not actually a guy, it's a girl, the new leader of the PNM and the opposition. And in the article, the opposition, through former Minister of Energy / Prime Minister Stuart Young, said that they have been assisting people in his constituency and from other constituencies. Kind of take that with a grain of salt as well. Since June, when the government fired CPAP workers and began firing other workers who are amongst some of the most vulnerable. Now again, this is true. To what extent does the alleged assistance he's having connected to those firings? I don't know. I don't know, right? But let's go with it, because I don't necessarily have evidence to disprove what he's saying, and he is referencing something that we know to be a fact, that certain groups of workers were fired. So, he said that he distributed hampers at the start of December. MP Keith Scotland said he plans to distribute December as well, yesterday, right? MP Hans Devines also said there's a significant and more than usual demand for assistance given all job losses. Now, one of the things that I wish that it did was maybe do some interviews for these people to try to compile some information. Maybe not statistics, but, with regards to public known information, what's been published in the media, what's been published by the government, then maybe get some freedom of information requests to help fill in the blanks. You could do some interviews of the individuals themselves to see, well, okay, how many of your group was fired, and so on, to compile some statistics on the matter. Otherwise, whenever I see statements like this, I'm always kind of wary. When you don't necessarily want to drill down in the details, it could be because we don't want all the details to be readily apparent. It's not always going to suit our narrative. That doesn't necessarily mean it's untrue. That's the tricky part with all of this. Marvin Gonzalez also said demand this year has been overwhelming. Now, the thing is, while I am wary, because again, these are sources that are supposed to be biased against the government, it also is in line with, one, what I have seen, experienced, and think, and two, what we know for certain with regards to some amount of job losses. Now, government MPs are also looking to give out hampers and the like. They have not necessarily spoken with regards to it being an unprecedented situation. But now we've reached the point where, because we're Christmas into Carnival, usually this is the period where people get distracted from the ills of society and people kind of stop complaining, at least for a little while. They're too busy having fun. But to what extent now, it was one thing when it was COVID, to what extent now is this going to make Christmas and Carnival less of a distraction when more people potentially are looking to have handouts? And again, while I do want to be wary about just taking whatever the opposition says that is a direct criticism of the government, it is kind of backed up by what the NGOs say. Let's not forget that. So, of course, this just adds on to the whole Moody situation, right? Some of the economists like Dr. Valmiki Arjun, he says, well, it's a warning, right? Our ratings and outlook tend to move with the energy cycle, improving when higher production and prices support export foreign exchange earnings and fiscal revenues, and coming under pressure when production declines or prices weaken. Prices are kind of not so high right now. Our production is also not so high right now. Our credit rating itself remains unchanged by both of them. We have not been downgraded, but the outlook adjustment signals that both agencies have placed our rating under review, essentially putting us on watch as they assess whether future economic conditions warrant maintaining our current standing. It's a warning. Have we done enough? This is one of those things now where it's a catch-22 with the current administration. Do you think the current administration has done enough and has done enough of the right decisions relative to the fact that they are new to the scene? Because we gotta have realistic expectations. They ain't gonna solve all the problems in the first few months. But have they done enough so far? And I would argue it's a bit subjective because we don't really have all the information. So for those that's going to just definitely say no, I'm not really going to agree with you. But for those who also want to say yes, the UNC will solve everything, well, is not what I'm hoping for, because I do think we need a greater sense of urgency given our situation. Because will is a promise that doesn't have to be fulfilled. The PNM also said they will do a lot of things. Not all of it was done, or not all of it was done in the manner of which we would have preferred. Now, the foreign exchange position I don't think is necessarily directly tied right now to the economic situation on the ground and the fact that there's so many people apparently that need assistance with regards to Christmas hampers and foods and the like. But those two things eventually can kind of converge economically if they get worse and are not addressed. The more people rely on handouts, the more there is a reduction of money circulating in the system. Yes, the NGOs can, buy a few things here and there, but generally speaking, hampers are not going to get you back to the normal level of spending you would do, even if it's just survival spending. So, in light of all that, there is something coming out of the government that makes me, I don't want to say upset, I'm not angered by it, I'm not wary about it. It's just one of those things where I'm a little bothered by it, just a little bit, just a tad. And I don't like the potential implication of what it means, because the Prime Minister apparently told, a few days ago, told her cabinet and told her MPs, and potentially even senators, but mainly that's what it was, yes, and senators too, and members of the UNC, etc. There will be a lot of work for all of them to do to deliver on the mandate the party received when they won the election. Brace your back, we have a lot of work to do in the new year. That's the quote. I'm sure a lot of you probably have seen it already because this is a few days old now. I'm just now getting to it. Tying it back to what we've noticed in the economy so far. So again, the PNM is saying, hey, things are bad, a lot of people have jobs, but this is somewhat backed up by the NGOs. Now she's saying we have a lot of work to do in the new year. Well, here's the thing though. I would have preferred if the Prime Minister, I didn't need her to go and dig a canal. I didn't need her to go and physically man the ship to dredge the port. I didn't need her to go and stake out the marijuana hall in the Caroni Swamp. I didn't need her to go and, you know, put sand in sandbags in case it floods. I didn't need her to go and operate the steamroller when they're paving the new roads. I just needed a leader to be present. And this is 2025. To be present doesn't mean that you have to go to every street corner because it's 1885. And for people to see you, you basically have to tour the country just for people to see you and hear from you. This is 2025. Not only do we have television, but we also have the internet, which is connected to computers and phones. There are multiple ways for the Prime Minister to get her message out. And positive leadership throughout all of the various things in the economy would have probably set the government up for better success. But also, it would have prevented this potential interpretation of her statements. What have you all been doing since April? Because essentially, you've had 8 months. Well, this is the 8th month. And again, I understand, you know, you have to wait until the next budget to do things. And the next budget came and went, and people are still out of jobs. People, I know for a fact, people who are waiting on the budget because their contracts are up and they weren't going to renew it until the new budget came out, etc., etc. And some people, their contracts were up from the election because some of those contracts are timed like that. So they're waiting on the budget and nobody wants to spend. That was the thought. That was the theory, I believe, myself and others had. Well, the government isn't really going to do anything because they're waiting for the budget, then they're going to start to do things. And lo and behold, really and truly, what have they started to do? It's been 8 months. The biggest thing that they've done, spend $3.8 billion on a political promise. On a political promise to a subsection of the country, not a political promise to everybody. Because one of the things that they didn't say was when UNC wins, the PSA wins. But it's hard not, I'm sure a lot of the other unions feel that way right now. It's not promises made, promises kept. It's promises made, politics kept. So this is the thing. We have a lot of work to do in the new year. Why? Why does it have to wait until the new year? Why? Why? You said it yourself. You're not part of this blockade. So what's the distraction? Where's all of the effort going into? The revitalization plan? Again, if all you have is concept art and a list, part of what makes a plan, as I said before, is what do you prioritize? Because you said you're starting it next year. That's cute. What part is being started next year? Has the financial effort to get the ball rolling, has that started yet? Or are you going to do your homework last minute? I really have an issue with this whole thing. 8 months in, we have a Christmas message of, hey, we have a lot of work to do next year. I get it, there was some work done with regards to flood mitigation, like, you know, right out the gate by certain ministers. There are other ministers we have literally heard nothing from. We have seen nothing, we have heard nothing. And as far as most of the country goes and knows, they have done nothing. And you might say that's unfair, we did X, Y, and Z, which I can understand if that's the case. Where is the positive leadership to explain the situation to us? Then, of course, the Minister of Public Utilities, Barry Padarati, also added on. Let me look for the quote. The Prime Minister's statement was timely and welcome. It sets the tone for the new year. Minister of Public Utilities, Barry Padarath. The Prime Minister runs a tight ship. When it comes to work, she is a hard taskmaster. A hard taskmaster. Working closely with her, I understand her drive for greater delivery and efficiency. That's nice. This is one of those things where if this was a novel, an author writing a novel, or a script writer, or a director with a movie or a TV show, there's a rule. Show, don't tell. Don't give us exposition on what you want us to know. Show it to us. Actions speak louder than words. Greater delivery and efficiency. Most of the things that the government has done, seemingly it was done without that much thought put into it. Whether they were good things or bad things, the implementation suffered. You want to deal with corruption, that's fine. You want to deal with noise pollution, that's fine. And a lot of people might say, I agree with it, I agree with it. I'm sorry, there are some negative consequences from it. Whether you agree with that statement or not doesn't really matter to me, because I'm seeing certain things, and it's things that we're experiencing, whether we think we attribute the cause being that or not. And then we haven't really seen much else. The Prime Minister doesn't take excuses from ministers. She pushes us to keep deadlines and promises. One of the things that we've seen a lot of from the cabinet is a lot of outrageous statements. A lot of outrageous statements that came over the hands of certain ministers. Outrageous statements, unnecessary statements, bubble statements, unprofessional statements. I'll say this. I'm not entirely sure if we had quite as much outrageous statements and unnecessary statements from PNM. We had outrageous controversies. It just wasn't necessarily solely the nonsense that came out of their mouth. And a lot of these things are unnecessary stuff. It's not like there was a controversy in the government and then somebody kind of put their foot in their mouth. We saw that with the PNM. Cool. No, we just have nonsense. Real insignificant nonsense being played out. I'm not seeing any sort of efficiency in those statements, the delivery of anything significant or promising or pertinent in those types of statements. I'm not seeing any sort of accountability or professionalism. So I don't really see where the Prime Minister is running a tight ship when it seems as though she has certain people just for their propensity to go off the rails. Because apparently in 2025, you need that. And I say that not just because I see certain ministers in certain ministries, housing, go off the rails, but also some of the opposition as well. Everyone's more concerned about having their attack dog and pit bull and who could be more crazy than the other side's pit bull, as opposed to, hey, maybe we should govern, I don't know, responsibly. Now this is Minister of Energy Rudra Munilal. The Prime Minister alerted us yes again to the enormity of the challenge we face after almost a decade of incompetence and destruction by the former PNM administration. That's nice, but look at it this way. Do you have time to waste? Because they are 10 years. But we've seen 2/3 of the first year of this administration go. When you look, what is the accomplishments? Well, we have, customs and excises on alcohol, taxation on rental properties, which most likely will lead to commercial and residential rental rates at the lower end go up. So pressure for you if you are at the lower end and you can't afford to have a rate increase. Some people can. Some people like living in a cheap apartment, but they can afford better. Not everybody in a cheap apartment is that way. That's what we've seen. It's not I don't need you to fix Rome in a day, but I needed you to be more urgent about fixing Rome from the start. And I get it, the first couple of weeks, couple of months, you're taking your time, you're seeing what you're seeing, you're trying to figure things out. But certain decisions were made where you didn't really go too deep into the analysis because they were political promises. I'm not just speaking about the 10%. And the fact of the matter of the inability to try to at least explain to people why this is how it's supposed to be, you know, this is as fair as it could get, etc., etc. It shows me that you were unprepared for the decisions and the promises that you made. You followed through with them, in some cases seemingly very reluctantly. But if political loyalty is one of the main factors in decision making for some of the decisions that have been put out there already, and that 10%, listen, on some level, people, I think, underestimate what that $3.8 billion means. It more than doubles the stated deficit. But look at it from this point of view, because I always said the deficit that the PNM gave us was never the true deficit. The deficit that Dave Tanku gave us, Minister of Finance, was obviously not the real deficit. He just refused to budget something that they politically promised. That is, now, in what world can I craft a reasonable argument to defend that and say it was not a deliberate attempt to downplay what the true deficit for this fiscal year is supposed to be? It was a political promise that despite their own best efforts, and we saw it played out in the press, they still had to follow through. And he wants to say it could be 0%. Let's flip that another way. What are potential partners, whether private investment partners or other governments, going to think if the level of negotiating by this administration is, before the election we negotiated certain things, we promised certain things, and let's be frank now, you support us, we give you 10%. That's basically what it was. And now after the fact now, well, it could be 0%. You want to renegotiate? You want to renegotiate after the fact? To what extent now did everyone who already looks at our investment rating and the outlook being negative, are they aware of the Minister of Finance basically saying, well, you know, that promised 10%, it could really be 0%. And they're basically going to say, hey, how much value is your word when your word publicly, by your admission, might mean nothing? And I'm not saying that his word means nothing. I'm saying that the level of communication mistakes might open them up to that interpretation. All right, before I go on, there's something that I wanted to further this discussion with. I have a video to play. It's with regards to leaderships and democracies and the failures of democracies. I don't necessarily agree with the conclusion, and I'll state why, but to get the ball rolling further, it's time to cue this.
Socrates argued that democracy inadvertently leads to a kind of self-mutilating tolerance. Today we might call it suicidal empathy. An inherent flaw of democracy is that it incentivizes politicians to become demagogues, meaning they say things that are popular rather than things that are successful. And an example of this is helicopter money, which is when the state prints money out of thin air and gives it to the people. So that's usually very popular in the short term, but in the medium term it actually causes inflation. So when a democracy devolves into a demagoguery, it basically becomes something like a popularity contest. So then power is no longer vested in the most competent candidate, but in the candidate who offers the most nice things. And according to Plato, that leads to a loss of respect for authority. So children disrespect their parents, students disrespect their teachers, and the people disrespect their rulers. Think something like a hesitancy to punish crime for fear of backlash or in the name of tolerance. And this is where democracy turns into mob rule. And we can actually see symptoms of that. So there would be stagnating institutions or corrupted powers in the state, or politicians who care more about the next election than do about progress or leaders who become laughingstocks. But if everybody rules, then nobody rules. And so in this chaos, we start to seek order. But we know we're not going to get it with the politicians who got us into that mess in the first place. And so this creates an opening for an authority figure to come in and clean the house. So we don't actually hate being ruled. We just don't want to be ruled by someone we don't even respect. A 2024 study across 24 countries reported a median support for rule by a strong leader at 31%. And that number was higher in medium income regions like Latin America. Now, people often say that Latin America has a tendency to elect strongmen, but look at this study from France from 2025, where 48% of respondents agreed with the following statement. In a democracy, nothing advances. It's better to be less democratic and more efficient. Meaning half the respondents in a nation that's usually hailed as a full democracy actually favor efficiency over democratic idealism. And the same study also found that only 28% of participants believed democracy works well in France. So when a democracy succumbs to its inherent flaws, which is corruption, high time preference, the incentive to spend the treasury, then that democracy loses its essence, and it basically becomes something like a corrupt monarchy with faceless kings. And why put up with faceless kings when you can install a real king instead?
Now, I believe a lot of the speakers' ideology is based on the fact that she is in El Salvador with Bukele. I'm sorry if I got that pronunciation wrong. But that very charismatic and somewhat authoritarian leader with regards to how he solves crime in his country. Crime was so bad, people are willing to accept their personal freedoms being limited, restricted, and at times trampled on, because the thought is there are some innocent people caught up in all of the mass arrests and incarcerations. But for the most part, it's not that people don't know about it, it's that people are willing to accept some of it to a degree. So you kind of have to take some of her position on a grain of salt, because when she says, or she's pointing the factor of authoritarian leaders to fix the problem, the issue with that is, how do you pick that leader? You could have an issue where at some point the electorate, the voter base gets tired of the demagoguery, the popularity contests, and the politicians who are more concerned about that than actually looking to implement good policy and solve solutions. So what do? Well, you look to someone to drain the swamp. Now the question is, maybe you pick someone that's a little too aggressive in that direction. And now you have regrets, because it's not a baby step, it was a big step. It was a big step with a big personality that's, on some level, I think he is hell-bent on solving these problems. It's just the manner of which he does it. He doesn't always screw things in. You know, he doesn't always glue things together. Everything is hammered down. It could be made out of some brittle clay or plastic. It's still hammered down. Takes a hammer to every problem looks like a nail. That's what it seems like, right? Now, but go back to the beginning of what she said. Politicians who say things that are popular, everybody wins. I can't think of the PNM slogans right now, but at times they do it too, right? I'm not going to say they don't do it. Just don't shoot me for not being able to think of these slogans right now, right? They do things that are popular but not practical. Our elections at some point seems to be more like a popularity contest. How much real policy was debated on the campaign trail? It was either a defensive effort on, you know, we did the best we could and we did so much well and they are just bad, or, well, you kind of got that from both sides, really. Some level of that from both sides. But did we get, like, policy positions? We got certain policy positions. We'll scrap the WASA report and you're going to get your 10%. That's what we got. Things that didn't necessarily help the greater whole of the country, one. And two, with regards to scrapping the WASA report, I'm not convinced that WASA is a stable and healthy entity with no issues at all that needs to be fixed. But then, look at where she went further. And maybe this, I don't know to what extent this is completely tied together, But she pointed to the fact that then you get a lack of respect or loss of respect for authority. Because I guess on some level, who are the authority figures? They're not actually trying to be authority figures. They're trying to be popular. That's not the same thing. Because they're not actually trying to solve the problems. They're trying to implement what you want them to do to solve the problems. That's not always the same thing. More often than not, they're very different things. As a population, to say that we're just going to easily come to a consensus in a national conversation to the best solution, when more often than not, for complex situations, most of us are ignorant to all the details with regards to solving the issue. So our consensus is going to be what we feel that we want, not what we know as a matter of fact is the best. And if it's a popularity contest, that's what they're going to give us, not what is the best solution objectively based on the numbers and proper analysis, but what the population is willing to accept. So without proper leaders, you basically start to get a lack of respect. You see it in the schools. You see it in the level of crime. You see it in the everyday law breaking. You see it in the fact that, well, on some level, what is a popular decision? We need the PH taxis. We're not going to bother to try and find a solution because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what the people want. Give it to them. No one cares about when you have a situation where a PH taxi was used to commit a crime or a crime was inflicted on a PH taxi. And I don't necessarily agree with the conclusion that the young lady had. That, you know, when you want to get out of this popularity contest, yes, you can't look necessarily to the politicians that get you there, because the environment is optimized for that. Our election process has told these politicians, they didn't have to be this way, they didn't start off this way, they weren't born this way. Our election process told these politicians, this is what we want you to be. And then now, we want to abandon them and push them all to the side, in part because, A, we developed them that way. They learn from the environment that we provided for them, and we don't want to wait to see if they could change. We'll go with something, you know, totally off the wall. And that's when you get what seems to be crazy situations leading countries. And that's not the worst. Some people think, oh my gosh, Trump is the worst, and what's going on in El Salvador is the worst. No, that's not the worst. History has examples where dictators take advantage of that sentiment. Real dictators. How do you think Hitler got where he was? Because he basically convinced people that he was a reasonable compromise in order to fix their democracy, to fix their economy, to fix their society. And once he got the power, blah, you saw what happened. It was a certain type of spectacular failure. We fall for that. That is human nature. When COVID happened, people marvel about Chinese, the quick response, not necessarily realizing, well, that's what an authoritarian regime could do. They could basically just say, we're putting resources here, and we don't care who don't like it. We'll pull the resources. The thing is, we don't know when they set up those hospitals in record time. We don't know where those resources came from, what potentially got neglected, how important those neglected things were, and what were the negative consequences for pulling those resources in the manner that they did. We don't know. We don't know. We just know that they made a decision and executed it quickly. And in our Western democracies, that's a very difficult thing to do. So a lot of people, there's a reason why in the West, there are people who believe in Vladimir Putin. There are people who look at China and say, hey, look how much good things they're doing. Don't mind the fact that, hey, it seems as though individual rights, freedoms, ownership of property, etc., etc. You can have those things in China once it doesn't trump the party. Once it doesn't run afoul of the party. If we think our party politics are bad, that's a one-party politics state. The entire 8 months that we've had, to tie it back to what I was saying before, think about it. We had these slogans, right? Not everybody is feeling those slogans right now, though, and I think this is something that UNC supporters need to understand. Because what they're going to do is they're going to blame the others and call them all, label them all as PNM supporters. And I remember seeing this back in 2016, where you had liberals who disagreed with the party line, with the ideology of the Democratic and liberal activists, so they were labeled as conservatives. Meanwhile, they never voted Republican in their lives, and they never supported a conservative candidate in anything, but they were labeled as Republicans. Because at the end of the day, this is the other side that she didn't mention. It's a popularity contest, but it's also an idealistic tribal competition. For us to win, you have to lose, and we'll denounce you and vilify you, and anyone that disagrees with us has to be wrong. And then your politics turns into a mess. And then you don't know how to get out of it. Because what does she say? You're going to depend on the same people that got you into this mess to get you out of it. We want constitutional reform. A lot of people, I think, would like to see constitutional reform, at least those that have an opinion on the matter. Except who's going to actually change the constitution? The same people who are utilizing the system in ways that we don't like, which is why we want constitutional reform in the first place. The reason why I don't agree, once again, with her conclusion is, you could try to pick an authoritarian figure. If you pick the wrong one, and you give him the keys to the Cadillac, you give him the keys to the kingdom, and you put the crown on his head, things might end up in a real bad way. Always be wary of anything with the label of emergency powers. Because that implies, A, certain protections are going to be removed. And then what's going to happen? So I don't like it. You know, that song, what are you waiting for? You know the economy's in a mess from the last 10 years, previous April the 28th. What are you waiting for? So now, this is a which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is it that bad politicians came first, or voters with bad demands, bad expectations, bad motivations, did that come first? Did Eric Williams come first, or did Eric Williams look at the population and say, for me to win, I'm going to act a certain way? And now in hindsight, we could say, well, we don't like what he did. You know, we don't like the decisions he made. But hey, he won the election. And maybe, when someone that wins an election does something that we perceive as failure, maybe we should take a step back and ask ourselves this question. Why did we pick him or her? Why did the people back then pick Eric Williams? And maybe some of the blame should lie with the people of TNT. Because I will argue that however bad or good Dr. Eric Williams was, we have more or less had a similar decision-making process on picking our politicians from the very beginning. We haven't necessarily strayed off of that. It looks worse now because, not because the politicians are dumber, although arguably you could say maybe the politicians are more corrupt. But I would say perhaps one of the main factors is that the environment has degraded over time, and thus the environment that they have to operate in, they have to move a certain way. Since it degraded over time, their behavior degraded over time as well. Because I don't like this whole, well, next year we have hard work to do. Well, what about this year? Didn't you have hard work to do this year? Where's the hard work this year? I'm seeing some, I'm not seeing all. I don't like the fact that we're basically getting from two sources, because it's not just the opposition, that they're going to have a lot of people this year, this Christmas, they're not going to have a good Christmas. They're going to be stressed out for this Christmas. They're going to be sad for this Christmas. They're going to have to do without for this Christmas. And hey, I know a lot of people who have to do without year round. Life is hard. I get that. But one of the funniest things in this situation is our politics is like a popularity contest. Our politicians do say what they think is the most popular. But somehow, at the end of the day, they are going to run afoul with part of the population. And I don't know why. It has to be that way. Why they have to do things to make certain parts of the population angry or upset with them. We can't even get the popularity contest thing right. Okay. I've gone on for quite a bit. So let me take a break so I can get a drink of water. When we come back, we open the phone line. Stay tuned.
Win a brand new ride for Christmas in a 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queen's Royal College. First prize is a luxurious, fully loaded Royal Ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also at islandetickets.com. Mott Liquor Palace, Diggle Mountain Main Road. GN Food Center, Saparia. Uncle Beto, Santa Cruz. Better Deal Supermarket, Cunupia and Aranguez. Cans Liquor, Diggle Mountain Main Road. Ramsing Sports, Chaguanas and Cuba. Bobby's Barbecue Wrap, Mirage Supermarket, Sangre Grande. West B Supermarket, Diggle Mountain and Tacarigua.
John's Supermarket, Upper Bonds Road.
Payless Hardware, Diggle Mountain Main Road. Dodge Roti, Pitti Valley. Mirage Westside Arima. Western Pharmacy next to St. James Police. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queen's Royal College 3-car raffle.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics. Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town. Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him. I know him.
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
I'm back and talk about WSN, the Connect Capital Show. Michael Small here. We have our first caller for the morning from Arima. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller, good morning. Caller, good morning. You there?
Yeah, morning.
Morning.
I want to say this, sure, Michael.
Yes.
In response to the economic state of play Christmas 2025, at the end of the final analysis here, I conclude that the government is financially bankrupt. It have a term is used of here called Lammy and Porsche. When you're fronting, you're acting like if you have money. But in actuality, you don't. And I'm going to say so because when I watch what happened, me personally, in July, I submitted my tax returns. In August, I got confirmation. I still waiting to collect it. One of my co-workers, a former worker, whenever he called, we tell him still no funds ain't released yet. Secondly, the CPET URP review and shutdown. I realized that was a sacrifice to pay this 10% to PSA workers. But we'll have a problem next year. Because all these people, all the unions who didn't sign up between 2014 and 2019, they too have an expectation at 10%. And with the state of play right now, I can't see how that happens. The next thing, I look at the refinery. So they want to open it, okay, nothing wrong with that. You find have a capacity of 250,000 barrels a day. But our output is about 50,000 to 60,000 barrels a day. Where we get the rest of this oil from? Especially when Bar Jack, they were said, Diana and oil to give Trinidad. So, we're watching at it going forward. I realize with the Prime Minister tell Peter what you can't tax your way out of our into prosperity. But she's doing the same thing. This is a sign of times to come. And we really got to get serious in this place. Because as they were saying just now, is what Dumbledore said in Harry Potter. What is right is not always what is easy. So when they're talking about politicians talking to say the popular things, what is right is not what is easy. And my conclusion to you is this. Right now, Trinidad and Tobago need the dragon. But the dragon ain't need Trinidad and Tobago right now. Because if you look at the situation down in Point Lisas, the organization willing to pull out because they ain't getting no certainty about a gas supply. So all the talk that we're talking about, we never use none of Venezuelan gas and all of that. Ours is running out. And if we don't try and diversify Trinidad and Tobago, well then Crapo smoke we fight because all we're going to be getting is talk. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. Do we have another call on the line? All right, so here's the thing. I don't know if, because similar to my disagreement with Dr. Rowley's statements, like when you kind of go too far, the problem is, I understand in everyday life, when you want to get strong emotions across, you go too far. One could argue I maybe go too far sometimes on the show. I don't know if I agree to say that we are bankrupt. To say that we are bankrupt, that has a whole different meaning, I think, to where we are now. And the thing is, maybe we are worse off than last year or the year before, but I don't think it's that much more worse off, really, right? And we have to remember that when the PNM first came into power, and I think maybe even the last year of the partnership, things weren't that good. And there were indicators in the last year or two of the partnership that things were going to go downhill, right? If you knew what to look for, available to the public, with regards to the gas prices and oil and gas revenues for the country. And that was around the time when Gates had to be sorted out, right? And one could argue, Gates was a free-for-all when we had the money. When we had the money, that was what was popular because, you know, one said dollar for dollar and then the next one said, I could do one better, Gate. All of that is for the popularity because there was no plan to utilize that education. So we have educated the population, but we have not made use of that with regards to developing the economy and improving the situation we have with regards to our workforce, our private sector, public sector, what have you. They're more educated, but the kind of jobs, the level of jobs, the amount of jobs didn't really change, it seems, right? And arguably, the PNM more or less did the same thing. They tried to kind of manage the situation without doing anything too drastic. At least they didn't want to do anything too drastic. We'll see if this government will do something drastic. And they didn't necessarily, in the end, with the benefit of hindsight, it seems as though they didn't really do enough to change the trajectory of the economy. They were very content to sit back, relax, do the popular thing in order to keep getting elected, right, and to not be hated. But that didn't work the third time around, or the second time around, on the re-election. And that's what I'm afraid of with regards to this government, because I'm seeing the methods are different, the means are different, the level of communication is not that dissimilar. They just shuffle things around in a different way. However, when you have messages at unprecedented situations of needing help or more than normal for Christmas, again, I don't know what they're comparing it to, but let's go with it for now. Yeah, we might be a little bit worse off than we were, say, last year, but that was the trajectory that we were going. And potentially that might have been the result, whether it was PNM or UNC in charge today. We have Faisal in line. Good morning, caller, you're on here. Caller, you still with us?
Hello, good morning, John.
Morning.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, firstly, I want to deal with the refinery. The refinery is not going to open like tomorrow. And while the refurbishment of the refinery is going to take place, we have exploration and production taking place. So which should help us to increase the oil production that might take us to a place of comfort, if not comfort, but close to comfort. And they would do as best they were doing in the past. The only plus to that is that you have Suriname and Guyana who might just be willing to sell us oil, because we used to buy oil to keep the refinery running, Sean. So that is no secret. Secondly, yes, the government is strapped for cash. And I heard one of your callers say that, they're going to tax their way into prosperity. Sean, the reality of the thing is, if you look at the items what were placed under the tax regime, would be luxury items like alcohol, like cigarettes. They were increased by almost 100%. But when you look at the relief side of the thing, property tax is only the people who are having an income from their property would be allowed to pay tax, and it is segmented to 2% to 3.5% dependent on your earnings. I think under 20,000, you are going to get tax 2%. Upper that will be 3.5%. So what you need to measure is that these big people like all of by UE and all of them places, the Aravis, the Ember, the who have big building renting, we're going to get some money out of them. That would help take care of the economy a little bit. It will take a while for the government to put things in place and restructure. These things doesn't happen overnight. They happen progressively. They happen, and while they were happening, we are being lied to and said the economy was in a good place. It's only when this government gets into power that we are seeing and feeling, not only seeing, but feeling the reality of the lies that were told to Trinidad and Tobago. So I am saying that yes, we're in a bad place. Collectively, we can make together. I am seeing that Shell and Exxon and everybody is hedging the bet towards Trinidad and Tobago. Hopefully, we'll be in a better place, maybe in a year and a half time, by the time the refinery is open. With respect to tax return, I heard the gentleman mention about his refund for tax return. And yes, I've had filed my returns already, Sean, under previous regimes and what have you. And it took as much as 2 years to get it back. And I'm sure other people will share similar sentiment. But, it all depends on how the people deal with it, the availability of funds, and I think they will disburse it accordingly, So I think, we would be in a good place in time to come, my brother. Take care.
Caller, I'll try and be quick because we have some final waiting. But one, fields that don't exist that are not up and running, that is a wish and a hope and a prayer. The PNM also tried that. That's not a plan, right? We haven't really heard a plan, right? We heard an almost budget, and we heard revitalization dreams, but we don't have a plan. That's number one. Number two, I said things were bad before. Things were bad on the PNM. There were external shocks. And the thing with that is, look, I pointed this out before you called. The indicators were there from since before the partnership lost that election in 2015. Because people were predicting, the government is running out of money. Then. That has nothing to do with the PNM. because we had money under most of the partnership time. And by the time the PNM came into power, we had no money. We did not have the level of money that we had during the partnership's time. And it was painfully obvious if you want to just look at the situation and say it's not fully only because of what the PNM are doing. When the price of oil and gas was $19 a barrel. Obviously, things ain't going to be like when they're $60, $70, $80 a barrel. When the price of gas bottomed out, I don't know what the price of gas was at the time, but similarly, it was bad, right? So, let me just go to the rental tax. If you want to do the big time renters, the rich people, you could have crafted the law to only go after them. You could have excluded a lot of the people, particularly that part under 20,000. If it's just for the wealthy, then why include them? Or whatever the rent is, right? Whatever the threshold was. Why include the bottom threshold at all? No matter how fair tax is, there is always going to be a negative consequence or side effect from taxing the population because you're taking money out, right? Now you need to do that because you need to provide services the private sector can't provide. So there's nothing good to sell to finance that really, right? So that's what the taxes are for, everybody chipping in to pay for these communal services. But there's always a limit to how much you can tax. And when the economy is doing bad, taxing the people in that economy, this is the basic argument for some of the basic criticisms of the PNM property tax. Not how the tax was crafted or whatever. Just the basic premise of is now the time, given how bad things are and how much people are struggling with the cost of living. Fran on the line. Caller, good morning. Morning.
Hatching for broiler chickens. Karen seemed to not understand fully the poultry industry because she's fixated on these foreign franchise holders. So I want to say this, so I hope she hears it, or you let her know. We in Trinidad and Tobago, we produce about 3.7 million birds a month. That is for birds for eating.
Yeah.
That is 80% of what our needs. So we still import an additional 20% of finished birds, right? Within that industry, 40% of the sales are done by pluck shops and poultry depots. 40% of the sales, right? In addition, the rest of the other 60% is consumed by the supermarket sector, the fast food service industry, the hotels and hospitality, school feeding, hospitals, and the security services. So even though there's this issue with the foreign franchise holders paying the franchise fee, the majority of our chicken industry is not consumed by the foreign franchise holders, and Karen needs to understand that. Because the information is there. If she really wants to get it, tell her go to the Poultry Association and she can get the information. So I still maintain that there is a market in Trinidad and Tobago, and for us to go further down the value chain to start to produce our own eggs for hatching our chicks that we eat every day in this country. Go further down the value chain. That would reduce our import, our foreign exchange draw on the central bank. Because if we produce it locally here, we just close in the loop. We close in the loop. Now let me say quickly, this refinery issue. It is all well and good if the government opens the refinery, but it is not going to be a quick process, and it is not going to be a cheap process. Even at a scaled down plant. Let me say this. Last year there were some people looking at the refinery. And when they looked at the cost of startup, right? Just a startup, because you have to, for that refinery we've done for 8 years. The cost of startup, Sean, when they stopped counting when it reached $15 billion. And this is, I am not asking about this. I'm telling you. They stopped counting when it reached 15 billion. So if this government is going to do a scale-down version of the refinery, what they pay the public servants, they have to find that again, at least. For the public servants back, but they have to find that, at least have to find that. And then it's going to take a process to get it up, to do the repairs, and then we have to look at finding, because we don't, if it is that they, okay, they say we're going to only refine what we produce in Trinidad and Tobago, which is about 50,000 barrels a day, all well and good. All well and good. But we're still going to have to purchase product because what we produce here is not what we refine. We still have to bring in, because you know crude, you blend crude to mix to refine. If you understand the process.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to still have to do some sort of importation. So it is not. This is not an easy road ahead, you know. Just as Arima said, this is not an easy road ahead. This road is a difficult road, and I think the posturing of the government, because it is not there's no the population no longer waiting to give nobody any honeymoon period anymore. This now is you come into power and you put your boots down and you start a grind. This is not about posturing and old talk anymore, because this economy is in a bad state. And if you listen to what Roger Hussein said 2 days ago, you will understand how bad the situation is. And there is worse to come in 2026, sorry, if it is that this continues. Because if you think we are at the bottom now, we have lower to go. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, the thing with the refinery, it's an older refinery. So more modern refineries, newer refineries might not have this restriction. We have an older refinery. It was older when it was shut down. It was old before it was shut down. It's quite aged. As Mr. Sam Fernandez said, so you're blending different types of sulfur content fuels, maybe heavy, light, sweet, sour, whatever, right? Depending on what's best for the refinery. And from what I understand in talks that I've had, our oil has a high sulfur content. It's not the light sweet crude. And light sweet crude is what I believe we imported to make gasoline. So even if we find oil, the type of crude, because somebody brought up, why was Venezuela sending oil to Iran when Iran is also an oil producing nation? Well, it's to do with who has the refinery set up for what. So not every refinery is just optimized oil, and this is the oil that we have here, and blah, 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 blah. I don't know why it was done this way, because you would think, oh, Trinidad has this type of oil, we should have a refinery to refine that type of oil. Well, that could have been because of age. Some of it is with regards to new technological advances. More complex refineries have advanced units to convert heavy, sour crude into high-value products, right? Or at least easier than refineries like ours, I would assume. So there is that. As far as I know, I could be wrong, but I don't think with regards to the current oil that we have on hand at the very least, I don't think we've utilized our crude oil in our refinery. If we've ever done it, we haven't done it for quite some time. We weren't doing it when it was shut down. We have Faisal back. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Yes, and so, you see, this is the problem I continue to have with commentators. Now, if you listen to Dr. Kevin Randall yesterday, as he was on another TV station, the information that he would have shared with the public, he would have spent 4 months in the recent past, taking a dive deep into the refinery. And what he would have revealed yesterday is quite differently to what you and some of the commentators are saying, from 2010 to 2014, there were major upgrades in the refinery that would have brought certain facilities up to par, up to international standard. They can be deemed practically new, except they would have been shut down over the last 8 years. So to say that it's an old refinery, I think we need to get the experts to tell us where we are and not just make loose commentary like I hear people are making. You know, what I am telling you is that facts that was laid out. Facts that were laid, I'm not guessing. I'm saying it after Mr. Ramnarai, who would have done an extensive research and review program of the refinery within the last 4 months, and he was bold enough to come on national television and make that revelation. So, as far as the refinery goes, there are one or two of the plants that if people understand the refinery, there are certain plants that take care of certain products. So there are one or two of the plants that need refurbishing. But the majority of the plant, like the gas optimization, the gas to liquid, it's up to mark, it's up to par. The distillation columns were, all those things were replaced. So we up to mark on majority of items on the refinery. As far as the bitter and sweet food, what we do in Trinidad is that we produce condensate. And the condensate is then blended with our high sulfur content crude to give us the product that we need. So when we stay here and we make comments, get the experts to come and let you know. We can't be spreading false narratives on what we feel and we mind. Yes? And we continue to do that. With respect to the taxation, if I want you to take a look back, Sean, at the taxation regime that the PNM would have had for the entire country, each household to pay taxes. A lot of the people were relieved of that burden, and they targeted the certain few, which in my mind, they believed that could afford to pay the taxes. And as you rightly said, that people do not like to pay taxes. But of course, if it is for the greater good, and in my mind, the relief for the bigger section of the population is considered to be the greater good. It is considered to be the greater good. And with respect to the PNM, I want you to take a deep dive and find out how much money it had in the Heritage Fund and what we had in foreign exchange at the central bank when the UNC exited office, and what the PNM would have brought it down to. These are the things you need to be talking about. Yes? All right, take care. Have a nice day.
All right, caller. So, first of all, fine. I will say I don't know everything about everything. I just was observing the fact that seemingly we never used our refinery to refine our crude. They have other plants. Okay. Was that shut down too? Some of the upgrades are not that new. So I was just kind of putting two and two together, partially based on an experience observation. Could be wrong about that. Maybe things changed in the partnership over the last 15 years, but it is what it is. Generally speaking, I think I have not necessarily heard you say, I could be wrong, you might have said it though, but I don't believe I heard you say, yes, we were using our, we weren't importing oil, was it just for shortfall? With regards to the taxes, the PNM tax regime had nothing to do with the topic at hand. That's point number one, right? On that. I'm still not convinced that a refinery is fit for purpose, by the way, in the sense of it's not going to be the most modern refinery. It got upgrades, but all right, an expert might be able to tell me, but just because it got upgrades doesn't mean I could upgrade tires on my car, doesn't make it a new car. It doesn't allow it to do the things that a new car could do. It doesn't give it new features. I could put in a new radio. I could put in new things in my car. It doesn't mean that it's going to have all the same things that a new car does. So, yeah, like I said, with regards to the taxes, the PNM tax regime, that is neither here nor there. That doesn't justify what the government is doing. Now, if you're saying the taxes are needed, that's nice. I didn't say that it was only that people didn't want to pay taxes. I'm saying the state of the economy right now, when you have people that are potentially on the margins, more so now when they don't have a job, why tax them? How is it going to be a net positive to tax them? And if you think it's only the renters are being taxed, the reality of the human psychology is the taxes will be passed down. And the ones that will be very clearly be passed down in part out of necessity are for the taxes at the lower end of the scale. And the people who rent at the lower end of the scale are going to be people who could least afford to absorb the increases. And it's the same thing for commercial rents. So the question was not if people don't like taxes. Now is not the time because they don't like it. The question is now the time because can we afford the negative damage that any tax increase will cause to any economy? Because even when the economy is doing well and we're rich, technically speaking, it's still a negative on the economy. We just don't notice it or feel it because we're fine. We're way ahead of the game. The loss isn't that pronounced to us. But in a situation where the economy is seemingly a lot worse off, regardless of how it got here and whose fault it was, implementing something in order to try to get revenue, which may or may not be needed, to be fair, still doesn't automatically make it the best decision. Because I guess it comes back down to if we really needed the money and we wanted to do it a bit more carefully, why don't we look at the higher brackets? Also, inelastic goods, taxing people on that. The thing is, if you cause people to spend less, you cause an economic slowdown where you don't actually get an increase in tax revenue. We have San Fernando in line. Caller, good morning. Yeah. Go ahead, San Fernando.
Yes, Sean. Good morning. Again, I want to say this to the caller from Faizabad. He does not know what he's speaking about. The condensate that they blend in with the crude that he's talking about is for export, to enhance the crude so we could get a better value for it for export.
Yeah.
That is what it is. That is not the case for the refinery. He does not know what he's speaking about. And tell him for me, Mr. Ramnarayan, I am willing to debate Mr. Ramnarayan on the condition of that refinery any day. Any day, bring him on your program. Any day I want to debate him. I don't know what he's talking. He don't know what he's talking about. That plant he's talking about, that upgrade that he's speaking about, that plant, that Samsung plant that was done, it was not approved because when it started it up, it started to vibrate and it had to be condemned, and it is costing too much money. Better it is rebuilt than refurbished.
This is that other plant.
Yes, the gentleman, tell the gentleman for me when. Tell them wait, and because they have to report, they have to bring a report. You know, remember Mr. Ramnarayan and his team has done. They said they finished. They finished the report.
Yeah.
Let us see the report. When the report comes out, are we going to see what they want to do, what has to be done, and what is going to cost the country, and then we could speak. So don't come and tell me about things that you don't know about.
All right.
Have a good day, Sean.
All right, yeah, let's not be so combative, but I understand the points that you're making. Because again, from what I have observed as facts on the issue, that is in line from what I have observed and what I have told with talking to people throughout the last few years on the issue. So I was ready to, if I was wrong, I was wrong, but that was, I wouldn't say the narrative, that was what I've been told by people who have more direct experience with the refinery. And Mr. Sampana is someone who, at least compared to me, has more experience personally in the energy sector on that level. Now, one of the very odd things, I don't know if you've noticed, there are a lot of people who are really quiet. A lot of people are really quiet right now. A lot of people really don't want to talk to the media, or they don't want to talk at all, right? The thing is, with regards to Mr. Ramnarine, to what extent is he having to be careful with his message? It's not necessarily because he has bad intentions. Politics is one of those things where once you are in it, even in the capacity of being on a board, being part of a commission, being part of a team, right? You don't have to be a politician itself, but you're still playing the political game. And the only way you could ensure that you do not play the political game is to not be involved at all, which is why you have a certain cross-section of the country of our young people that they don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. They don't want to touch that with a 100-foot pole. They don't want to touch that with a pole made out of adamantine. So we have news coming up, so we'll have to end there. But I'll just say, Mr. Ramnarine, he's going to have to say certain things to kind of be in line because he needs to display a certain level of, he needs to not do anything that will make him come across as politically disloyal. That's one of those hidden secrets of our political system. There are a lot of people that don't want to talk right now. They had a lot to say when the last administration, but they don't want to talk right now. That's the difference. They could have all the credentials they want. They could have been doing this for all the long time that they had. They could have had how many successful takes or nonsense takes. They could have all of the BSc, MAB, whatever on the name. They could have professor in front of the name. They could have all the big jobs. I'm still here doing what I do. Change of government doesn't matter. And a few of us still continue because we don't have a bias for any side and we're not looking for no handout. We ain't looking for no political patronage either. We're doing the work. This is Talking Point at WESN. Have a good day. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe. Don't forget it's nice to be nice. And maybe think about what the word objectivity means to you when you listen to news from this point on. We'll see you tomorrow to close out. Bye-bye.
WESN